Hi, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Southern Poverty Law Center, a once revered organization that used to actually help poor indigent people gain their actual civil rights, but for many years now it's really been just known really as just a fundraiser that actually doesn't even spend the money that they do collect. I found this article, King of Fearmongers, Morris Dees and the Southern Poverty Law Center, Scaring Donors Since 1971. This is by Charlotte Allen of the Weekly Standard. This was in April of 2013. I'll just read a little bit from it. Last August, a 28-year-old gay rights volunteer named Floyd Corkins entered the office lobby of the Family Research Council, a Christian traditional values group headquartered in Washington that condemns homosexual conduct and opposes same-sex marriage. Corkins took a gun from his backpack and fired 3 shots at building manager Leo Johnson, one of them wounding the unarmed Johnson in the arm before he wrested the gun from Corkins. Corkins told investigators that he had intended to kill Johnson and numerous other FRC employees. His backpack contained 15 sandwiches from the fast food chain Chick-fil-A, whose founder, S. Truett Cathy, contributed through his family foundation to several organizations opposed to gay marriage, including the FRC. According to prosecutors, Corkins said he had planned to smear the faces of the dead FRC employees with the sandwiches once his shooting spree ended. What a horror. What a horrible piece of garbage this person is. Corkins found out about the FRC from the ever-expanding, at least in recent years, list of hate groups tracked on the website of the Southern Poverty Law Center, a civil rights behemoth bursting with donor cash, headquartered in Montgomery, Alabama. Co-founded in 1971 by Morris S. Dees Jr. and Joseph Levin Jr., the SPLC started out fighting legal battles against lingering segregation in the South. More recently, and more lucratively, its critics say, it has transformed itself into an all-purpose anti-hate crusader, labeling 1,007 different organizations across America, at last count, as anti-gay, white nationalist, anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, or just plain hateful. One SPLC category is general hate. The SPLC put the FRC on its list of anti-gay organizations in 2010, and the SPLC's hate map page, whose banner displays men in Nazi-style helmets giving Sieg Heil salutes, lists the FRC among 14 hate groups headquartered in the District of Columbia. The hate map doesn't include the group's street addresses, but those typically take only a few seconds to find with Google. Now, I'm going to make my own comment here. So this crazy guy, through this HATEWATCH list from the SPLC, easily found this group's address and shot people, trying to kill them, maim them. I would say that's a hate crime right there. And you know who enabled that hate crime? Well, let's see. At the time of the shooting, the FRC president Tony Perkins lost no time doing a sort of reverse Sarah Palin on the SPLC. Liberal columnists and bloggers had blamed Palin, blood is on her hands, wrote one, for the near-fatal shooting of former Arizona Representative Gabrielle Giffords near Tucson in 2011, because Palin had earlier placed Giffords on a target list of House Democrats to be defeated for re-election. The Tucson gunman, Jared Lee Luffner, who killed 6 people in the crowd at Giffords' event, turned out to be a schizophrenic whose politics, insofar as they could be determined, lean left. The SPLC is dangerous, Perkins declared on his nightly radio show on February 6th. They are inciting hatred, and in this case, a clear connection to violence. They need to be held accountable, and they need to be stopped before people are killed because of their reckless labeling and advocacy for homosexual and the anti-Christian stance. Of course, it was as ridiculous to blame the SPLC for Corkins' rampage as it had been to blame Palin for Loeffner's. Still, there was a delicious irony to savor. The anti-hate SPLC had unwittingly revved up someone who carried out an act that was unequivocally a hate crime, a potentially murderous vendetta against a group of people predicated solely on the religious and political views that they happen to hold. Irony turns out to be what the SPLC is all about. Thanks to the generosity of 4 decades worth of donors, many of whom SPLC President Richard Cohen himself noted in a telephone interview with me, are aging northern state 60s liberals who continue to associate Southern and poverty with lynchings, white hooded Klansmen, and sitting at the back of the bus. And thanks also to what can only be described as the sheer genius at direct mail marketing of D's, the SPLC's 76-year-old lawyer founder, who was already a multi-millionaire by the late 60s from the direct mail sales of everything from doormats to cookbooks. The SPLC is probably the richest poverty organization in the history of the world. From its very beginning, the SPLC, thanks to D's talent for crafting multi-page alarmist fundraising letters, has not only continuously operated in the black, but has steadily accumulated a mountain of surpluses, augmented by a shrewdly managed investment portfolio. Today, the SPLC's net assets total more than $256 million. That figure appears on the SPLC's 2011 tax return, the latest posted on the organization's website. That represented a more than doubling of the $120 million in net assets that the SPLC reported in 2000, which was itself more than a doubling of the $52 million in net assets that the SPLC reported during the mid-1990s. Ken Silverstein wrote an article called, in Harper's Magazine, titled "The Church of Mars D's." Silverstein accused the SPLC of manufacturing connections between the hate groups that it highlighted in its numerous mailings. Back then, the groups on the SPLC list tended to be mostly fringe militia organizations, and the Columbine-style school shootings, and a wave of black church arsons during the 90s that were a staple of the SPLC's direct mail panic pleas. Horrifying as such incidents are, hate groups commit almost no violence, Silverstein wrote. More than 95% of all hate crimes, including most of the incidents SPLC's letters cite, bombings, church burnings, school shootings, are perpetrated by lone wolves. Even Timothy McVeigh, perpetrator of the 95 bombing of a federal building in Oklahoma City that killed 168 people, subject of one of the most extensive investigations in the FBI's history, and one of the most extensive direct mail campaigns in the SPLC's, was never credibly linked to any militia organization. I will continue on further, but the relevance this has to the men's human rights movement is that AVFM and MRAs in general have been on this hate list, or hate watch of the SPLC. And it turns out that they really have no standards at all when they call people or groups hate watch or put them on this hate list. They don't even do any research as to if they're a real group or if they are espousing hate or violence. Last time I checked, the First Amendment allowed hate speech. The ACLU and the SPLC should be the first people to support and defend that right. But of course, when you go into the level of violence, okay, we can report on that, but I'll continue on now. Silverstein followed up with more of the same in a 2007 post blog for Harper's. What the SPLC does best is to raise obscene amounts of money by hyping fears about the power of right-wing fringe groups or misogynist groups, men's rights groups. Hence, the SPLC has become the nation's richest civil rights organization. In 2001, Joanne Wapinski wrote in The Nation, "Why the SPLC continues to keep poverty or even law in its name can be ascribed only to nostalgia or a cynical understanding of the marketing possibilities in class guilt." Silverstein had already noted in his 2000 Harper's article that most SPLC donors are white. What has infuriated the SPLC liberal critics is their suspicion that Morris Dees has used the SPLC primarily as a fundraising machine fueled by his direct male talents that generates a nice living for himself and a handful of other high-ranking SPLC officials, plus luxurious offices and perks, but that does relatively little in the way of providing the legal services to poor people that its name implies. Charity Watch, formerly the American Institute of Philanthropy, an independent organization that monitors and rates leading nonprofits for their fundraising efficiency, has consistently given the SPLC its lowest grade of F, poor, for its stockpiling of assets far beyond what Charity Watch deems a reasonable reserve. 3 years' worth of operating expenses to tide it over during donation lean years. But even if the SPLC weren't sitting on an unspent $256 million, according to Charity Watch, it would still be a mediocre C-plus performer among net profits. The SPLC's 2011 tax filing reveals that the organization raised a total of $38.5 million from its donors that year, but spent only $24.9 million on program services, with the rest going to salaries, overhead, and fundraising. And even that 67% figure is somewhat inflated, according to Charity Watch, which notes that the SPLC takes advantage of an accounting rule that permits nonprofits to count some of their fundraising expenses as public education. If, for example, a mailer contains an informational component, Charity Watch, ignoring that accounting rule, maintains that only 60%, about $19 million, went to program services during that year in question. The SPLC's 2011 tax return reveals that the organization spent $1.6 million, aside from salaries, on litigation-related costs that year, in contrast to the $7.8 million it spent on professional fundraising services, postage and shipping costs, printing and letter shop, and other developmental costs. Without entirely jettisoning its cash-generating clan centrism, an SPLC webpage features a Birth of a Nation style black and white photo of hooded men making a sinister circle around a flaming 3-story cross. The SPLC changed the name of its quarterly magazine Clan Watch to Intelligence Report. The report features alarmed articles, often written by Mark Potok, a former reporter for USA Today who now serves as the SPLC's press spokesman and also as the editor of Intelligence Report and the organization's HATEWATCH blog. The articles in Intelligence Report and HATEWATCH bear such scary-sounding names as Rage on the Right, The Patriot Movement Explodes, For the Radical Right, Obama Victory Brings Fury and Fear, and Strange Bedfellows Snuggle Under White Sheets. A 2010 post on HATEWATCH didn't quite go so far as to characterize the Tea Party as a hate group, but it came close, citing the grassroots movement's attraction for anti-government extremists. On a webpage titled Misogyny, the Sites, the SPLC skirts self-parody, branding the manosphere blogs of pickup artists and other dispensers of seduction techniques as hate promoting because their posts bear such titles as "Even nice girls are sluts" and "More proof that feminism is a social cancer." That's self-parody, that's good. The SPLC is currently spotlighting the prison gang Aryan Brotherhood of Texas as a hate group because of its rumored, although as yet unproven, connection to the murders of 2 prosecutors in Kaufman County, Texas. One of the SPLC's lead motives is that there is an ever-spiraling amount of hate in America. And sure enough, its state-by-state list of hate and patriot groups has grown steadily over the years, especially during the presidency of Obama, a godsend to the SPLC's fundraisers because of his race and his pro-gun control and pro-gay marriage stances. In the SPLC's latest hate report, issued on March 5th, it counted a record 1,360 patriot groups alone during 2012, up 6.75% since 2011, and up by almost a factor of 10 from the mere 149 such organizations that the SPLC had counted just before Obama was elected in 2008. Critics have charged that the way the SPLC counts hate groups renders its impressive tallies essentially meaningless. One of the most vocal critics is Laird Wilcox, a self-described political liberal in Olathe, Kansas, who has been tracking radical fringe organizations on both the left and right for 5 decades, amassing an enormous documentary archive that is now housed in the library of the University of Kansas. According to Wilcox, many of the organizations on the SPLC's expansive list may be 2 guys and a post office box, while others may not exist at all. Their lists of hate groups never have addresses that can be checked, Wilcox said in a telephone interview. I've had police departments across the country calling me and saying we can't find this group on the SPLC's list. All they can find is a post office box, so I have to tell them that I don't know whether they even exist. In a self-published book, The Watchdogs, he criticized the SPLC for having misleadingly padded its list, you think, of white supremacy organizations. It's very similar to feminism, huh? You know, pad the list of problems and groups. This way you can earn more money and more sympathy. I go back to the article. In particular, Wilcox faulted the SPLC for maintaining that 3 men accused of killing a police officer in Cortez, Colorado in 1998 had belonged to a supposedly racist and anti-Semitic militia group called the Four Corners Patriots, for whose existence no evidence ever emerged. People have tried to track down these groups, but they couldn't find them. Contacted by telephone, SPLC spokesman Potok responded, "We really try to separate out real groups from a man and his dog and a computer. And yes, many of the groups are small. The reason we count groups is that it's incredibly hard to count people. Certainly counting groups isn't a perfect method, and there's a valid question of whether one group of 4 people is better than 2 groups of 2 people." I continue. Besides being willing to slap the hate label onto groups that may merely interpret data differently from the SPLC, the center routinely tries to link, if only by implication, increases in the number of hate and patriot groups it tallies to actual incidents of domestic terrorism and other violence. SPLC President Richard Cohen's March 5th warning letter to Holder Napolitano trotted out the Oklahoma City bombing one more time, even though neither McVeigh nor his convicted co-conspirator, Terry Nichols, had ever belonged to any organization that could remotely be called a hate or patriot group. Obama loathers, opponents of gun control, politically correct metalheads, grandmothers who stash canned goods in their basements because they are certain that the government is about to suspend the Constitution and that anarchy will ensue. Don't such stances, as long as they fall short of directly inciting violence, fall under the First Amendment's free speech protections? When I posed this question to Potok, he replied, when we list these groups, we're not predicting that they'll commit violence. We say very explicitly that we're listing them solely on the basis of their ideology. We're foursquare behind the First Amendment. We believe these people can say all these things, but we're going to call them out. We have never suggested restricting any kind of free speech. Still, there may soon come a day when the SPLC's donation-generating machine, powered by D's mastery of the use of hate to coax dollars from the highly educated and the highly gullible, finally breaks down. That is why, according to Cohn, the SPLC has no intention of soon spending down much of that $256 million in stockpiled assets that has earned the center an F rating from HATEWATCH. We've tried to raise a substantial endowment because our fundraising is on a downward trend, Cohen told me. Those 1960s liberals, they're getting older, and the post office is dying. We're likely to be out of the fundraising business within 10 years. What the SPLC wants to do is to ensure that hate is forever. Well, that's a thoroughly debunked organization. They're really just in it for a buck, okay? So when the men's human rights movement and the Voice for Men is criticized as a hate group or listed on any kind of list that is even related at all to the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, it means nothing, zilch. They'll indict they would sell their grandmother for a few bucks. So these hate sites, hate watch, misogyny sites that these idiots, the SPLC, have on their webpage, it's meaningless, okay? And for any of you people who actually do donate to the SPLC, do a little more digging, okay? I have friends who actually would swear by the SPLC, but you should really know the truth about the group, that they're sitting on millions of dollars when they purport to help the poor illegally. They could probably use that money, especially the people who are contributing that money and think it's going to help poor people, get out of jail, but that they'd be mistaken.